The summer sun blazed through Emma's window as she stared at the calendar pinned to her wall. A bright red circle marked the upcoming weekend, the long-awaited camping trip she'd been planning with her three best friends, Liam, Sophie, and Noah. For weeks, they had been dreaming about this adventure, eager to leave behind their routines and explore the untouched wilderness of Blackwood Forest. "This is going to be epic," Sophie had declared during one of their planning sessions. Sophie was the dreamer, always bursting with enthusiasm. Liam, the cautious one, had quickly added, "As long as we stick to the trail and don't get lost. Blackwood Forest isn't exactly forgiving." Blackwood Forest was known for its dense canopy, hidden waterfalls, and miles of winding trails. It was beautiful, but notorious for its maze-like terrain. Legends about missing hikers and mysterious sightings added an eerie allure to the place. Noah, always the optimist, shrugged off Liam's concerns. "Relax, I'm bringing my camera. We'll get amazing pictures and we'll have the map to guide us. Nothing can go wrong." Emma, the planner of the group, had taken charge of the logistics. She made lists, packed supplies, and double-checked everything from tents to flashlights. Despite her confidence, a small voice in her head whispered doubts. Something about the forest felt unpredictable. She brushed off the feeling. After all, this trip was supposed to be about adventure and freedom. By Friday afternoon, the four friends were packed into Emma's dad's old SUV, driving toward the edge of Blackwood Forest. The car buzzed with excitement as music blared and Sophie sang along, hitting every note off-key. "Are we there yet?" Noah teased, leaning forward from the back seat. "Almost," Emma replied, glancing at the GPS. As the trees thickened around the road, the sunlight dimmed and the forest seemed to welcome them into its embrace. At the trailhead, they unloaded their gear and took a moment to admire the towering trees and the faint, fresh scent of pine. A wooden sign marked the entrance to the trail, "Blackwood Forest. Proceed with caution." "Proceed with caution," Sophie read aloud, raising her eyebrows. "Reassuring." Liam laughed nervously. "It's just a standard warning. Let's get moving." The hike to their campsite was invigorating. The trail wound through dense foliage, with sunlight filtering through the leaves in patches. They paused to take photos, marvel at the wildlife, and share jokes. By late afternoon, they reached a small clearing by a bubbling stream, the perfect spot to set up camp. "This is it," Emma declared, spreading her arms. "Let's get to work." Tents went up quickly, and soon the group was gathered around a roaring campfire. The sky turned shades of orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. Sophie roasted marshmallows while Noah fiddled with his camera, capturing the golden hour. "This is the life," Liam said, leaning back against a log. "No phones, no responsibilities, just us and nature." As night fell, the forest came alive with the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves. The stars above twinkled brighter than any of them had ever seen, unpolluted by city lights. "Let's tell a story," Sophie suggested. "Something spooky." Liam grinned. "I've got one. Have you heard about the cabin that appears and disappears in these woods?" "Oh, come on," Emma groaned. "That's just a myth." "Maybe," Liam said, his tone playful but ominous. "But some say if you wander too far off the trail, you might find it, and never leave." The group laughed nervously, brushing off the tale as just another campfire story. But as the fire crackled and the forest grew darker, Emma couldn't help but glance over her shoulder into the trees, feeling as though they were being watched. As the fire burned low, the group retreated into their tents, exhaustion finally catching up with them. The sounds of the forest, a distant owl hooting, the soft rustle of leaves, and the occasional chirp of crickets, felt both soothing and eerie. Emma lay on her sleeping bag, staring at the tent's roof, her mind swirling with thoughts of Liam's story about the disappearing cabin. It's just a myth, she reminded herself. But the deeper part of her wondered, what if it's not? The night passed uneventfully, but when she woke to the first light of dawn, Emma found herself restless. She stepped out of her tent, stretching as the cool morning air filled her lungs. Sophie was already awake, sitting by the stream with a mug of instant coffee. Couldn't sleep? Emma asked, joining her. Not really, Sophie admitted. This place is amazing, but it's also kind of unsettling, you know, like it's alive. Emma nodded. She had felt the same. The forest seemed to have its own presence, watching them silently. By the time Liam and Noah emerged from their tents, the sun was fully up, and the group was ready to start the day. They decided to follow one of the trails leading deeper into the forest, aiming to find a rumored viewpoint that offered panoramic views of the entire area. The trail was steep but rewarding, leading them through dense clusters of trees and over small streams. They paused often to catch their breath, snapping photos of the scenery and laughing at Sophie's attempts to climb every rock they passed. Are we sure this is the right way? Noah asked after an hour of hiking. The trail had narrowed significantly, and the dense canopy blocked most of the sunlight. Emma checked the map. We're on track. The viewpoint should be just ahead. As they pressed on, Liam suddenly stopped. Wait, do you guys see that? They all followed his gaze to a pile of rocks stacked neatly into a small tower near the side of the trail. It wasn't something naturally formed, and it didn't look like a trail marker. Who would do that? Sophie asked, her voice hushed. Probably another hiker, Liam said, but even he didn't sound convinced. They continued, but the discovery lingered in their minds. When they finally reached the viewpoint, the sight was breathtaking. The forest stretched out in all directions, an endless sea of green dotted with patches of golden sunlight. This makes it all worth it, Sophie said, snapping photo after photo. The beauty of the view helped them forget the strange pile of rocks. But as they began their descent back to camp, they noticed something even stranger. A second stack of rocks, identical to the first, standing near the trail. It wasn't there when they had passed earlier. Okay, that's weird, Noah said, frowning. Are we being followed? Don't jump to conclusions, Liam replied, though his tone betrayed his unease. By the time they reached their campsite, the group was subdued. Everything looked as they had left it, except for one small, inexplicable detail. A single marshmallow stick from the night before was now lying in the middle of the clearing, perfectly balanced on two small stones. No one had an explanation. They decided not to talk about it, but as the sun set and the forest plunged into darkness again, the unease hung thick in the air. The second night felt heavier, the forest quieter than before. Emma lay awake, straining to hear the comforting chirps of crickets or the rustle of leaves, but the stillness was unnerving. Just as she was drifting off, a sound jolted her upright, a distant, high-pitched cry. She froze, her heart pounding. It sounded human but faint, as if carried by the wind. Did you hear that? Sophie whispered from the tent next to hers. Emma unzipped her tent and peeked outside. Liam and Noah were already up, their flashlights sweeping the dark forest. What was that? Noah asked, his voice trembling. I don't know, Liam admitted, but it sounded close. Sophie emerged, hugging her arms. It could be someone in trouble. Or someone trying to mess with us, Liam countered. We shouldn't go wandering in the dark. Against their better judgment, they decided to investigate, keeping close together as they followed the sound. The cry came again, leading them deeper into the woods. But as they moved closer, the sound abruptly stopped. Maybe it was an animal, Emma suggested, though her voice lacked conviction. They stood in silence, flashlights sweeping the shadows. The forest seemed alive around them, every creak and rustle amplified by their fear. We should head back, Liam said finally. It's not safe out here. As they turned to leave, Emma's flashlight caught something on the ground, a small wooden carving shaped like a cabin, lying half buried in the dirt. She picked it up, her hands trembling. What is that? Sophie asked, leaning closer. I don't know, Emma whispered. But deep down she had a sinking feeling that they were no longer alone in the forest. Back at the campsite, the group gathered around the wooden carving Emma had found. It was small and rough, clearly hand-carved with crude but recognizable details of a cabin, 4 walls, a peaked roof, and even tiny windows etched into the surface. It's just a coincidence, Liam said, though his voice wavered. Someone must have dropped it. Sophie frowned, brushing dirt off the carving. In the middle of the woods? After we hear a cry? Come on, Liam, that's not normal. It's not helping to panic, Noah interjected. We need to stay rational. Let's just put this away and focus on getting some sleep. But sleep didn't come easily that night. The cry and the mysterious carving weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Emma clutched the carving in her hand, staring at it under her flashlight. Something about it felt deliberate, as if it were a message. But from who? Or what? The next morning, the group woke to another unsettling discovery. Their map was missing. Emma, who had been meticulous about keeping it in her backpack, tore through her belongings, only to find nothing. I know I packed it, she insisted, her voice tinged with frustration. I checked it last night. Maybe it blew away? Sophie suggested, though the day was calm with no wind strong enough to carry a map far. Or maybe someone took it, Noah said grimly. Liam shook his head. There's no one else out here, we'd have seen them. The group decided to stay close to the campsite for the day, unwilling to risk getting lost without their map. But as the hours passed, a sense of cabin fever set in. The forest, once inviting, now felt confining, as if the trees themselves were closing in. By mid-afternoon, Noah and Sophie decided to venture a short distance to gather more firewood. They stayed within sight of the clearing, but as they were returning, Noah paused, his gaze fixed on the ground. Look, he said, pointing to a set of footprints in the dirt. Sophie squatted to examine them. They were larger than any of their own and appeared fresh. The prints led toward the forest, disappearing into the shadows. No one else is supposed to be here, Sophie whispered, her voice trembling. Let's just get back to camp, Noah said, gripping the bundle of firewood tightly. When they returned and relayed what they'd seen, Liam's face darkened. We're leaving tomorrow, he said firmly. This isn't just a coincidence anymore. Emma didn't argue. As much as she hated to admit it, she agreed. Something was wrong with Blackwood Forest, and staying any longer felt like tempting fate. That night, Emma woke to the sound of footsteps. At first, she thought it was one of her friends, but when she peeked out of her tent, she saw a faint light moving through the trees. Guys, wake up, she hissed, shaking Sophie awake. Soon, the whole group was gathered, flashlights in hand, staring at the strange light. Is it another camper? Sophie asked. Or someone trying to scare us, Liam muttered. We can't just ignore it, Emma said. Against Liam's protests, the group decided to follow the light, staying close together as they moved deeper into the forest. The light led them through a winding path they hadn't seen before. The trees loomed taller, their branches intertwining to block out the moonlight. Just as Emma was about to suggest turning back, the forest opened into a clearing. And there it was. The cabin. It stood crookedly, its wooden walls warped with age. A faint glow seeped through its windows, though no one seemed to be inside. The air was thick with silence, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. No way, Noah whispered. It's just like the story. Emma's heart pounded. The carving she had found was an exact match for the cabin in front of them. Let's go back, Liam said, his voice tight. We don't need to go in. But something compelled Emma forward. She stepped onto the creaking porch, her flashlight trembling in her hand. Wait here, she told the others. Are you crazy? Sophie hissed. We stick together. With reluctant nods, the group followed Emma inside. The cabin's interior was sparse, with a single wooden table, a chair, and shelves lined with dusty jars. The glow they had seen came from an old oil lamp flickering in the corner. Who lit this? Noah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma's eyes scanned the room, landing on a book lying open on the table. Its pages were yellowed with age, covered in handwritten notes and sketches. She picked it up, her fingers tingling as she turned the pages. This is weird, she murmured. The sketches depicted the forest, the trails they had walked, and symbols she didn't recognize. One page showed the cabin itself, with the words, The center is the key scrawled underneath. "What does that mean?" Sophie asked, peering over her shoulder. Before Emma could answer, the door slammed shut behind them. They spun around, flashlights sweeping the room, but no one was there. The wind howled outside, and the faint cry they had heard the night before echoed again, closer this time. "We need to leave," Liam said, his voice shaking. "Now." Emma clutched the book tightly as they bolted from the cabin, their footsteps pounding against the forest floor. The light from the cabin faded behind them, but the eerie sense of being followed didn't. The forest seemed darker than ever as the group sprinted away from the cabin. The path they had followed earlier was gone, replaced by dense underbrush and twisted roots that caught at their feet. The cries in the distance grew louder, echoing unnaturally through the trees. "Keep moving!" Liam shouted, his flashlight bouncing wildly in his hand. "Where are we even going?" Sophie panted, clutching Noah's arm to keep her balance. Emma didn't answer. She was too focused on the book in her hands, the weight of it feeling both ominous and necessary. She couldn't shake the feeling that it held answers, if only she could figure out how to read the cryptic notes and symbols. The cries stopped abruptly, plunging the forest into an eerie silence. The group slowed, their breaths ragged as they scanned the trees for any sign of danger. "Do you think it's gone?" Noah whispered. Before anyone could answer, a low, guttural growl sounded from the shadows. Flashlights swung wildly as the group backed into a tight circle. The growl grew louder, closer, until two glowing eyes appeared between the trees. "Run!" Liam yelled, grabbing Sophie's arm and pulling her forward. The others followed, their flashlights bobbing as they stumbled through the forest. After what felt like hours, the group collapsed in a small clearing, gasping for air. The growl was gone, and the forest was silent again. "What was that?" Sophie wheezed, her hands on her knees. "No idea," Liam said, glancing nervously around. "But it wasn't friendly." Emma opened the book, flipping frantically through its pages. Her flashlight illuminated a symbol she hadn't noticed before, a circle with an intricate design at its center. Below it, the same words repeated. "The center is the key." "What does it mean?" Noah asked, peering over her shoulder. "I don't know," Emma admitted, "but it has to be important. This symbol is everywhere in the book." Sophie pointed to the ground. "What if it's a map? Look at the way the lines curve. They kind of look like trails." Emma's heart raced as she traced the symbol with her finger. Sophie was right. The lines did resemble trails, converging at the center. If the map was accurate, the center was near their current location. Determined to find answers, the group followed the direction indicated by the map. The forest seemed to resist their progress, the underbrush growing thicker with each step. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were being guided, as if the forest itself wanted them to reach the center. Finally, they emerged into another clearing. At its center was a large stone slab covered in moss and etched with the same symbol from the book. "This has to be it," Emma said, stepping forward. The others hung back, their unease palpable. The air in the clearing felt heavier, as if they had crossed into another world. "What do we do now?" Liam asked. Emma knelt by the stone, brushing away the moss to reveal more symbols. The lines glowed faintly under her touch, sending a chill down her spine. She opened the book again, matching the symbols on the stone to those in its pages. "Maybe it's some kind of ritual?" Sophie suggested hesitantly. "Or a trap," Liam muttered. Emma ignored them, focusing on the final line of text. "To open the truth, you must give a piece of yourself." "What does that mean?" Noah asked, peering over her shoulder. Emma's hands trembled as she placed the book on the stone. The symbols began to glow brighter, their light pulsing like a heartbeat. The ground beneath them rumbled, and the air grew colder. "I think, it's working," Emma said, though she didn't sound convinced. As the symbols reached their peak brightness, the stone slab split in two with a deafening crack. A column of light shot up from the center, piercing the canopy and illuminating the forest in an otherworldly glow. The group staggered back, shielding their eyes. When the light faded, a narrow staircase was revealed, descending into the earth. Nope, absolutely not, Liam said, shaking his head. We are not going down there. Emma's curiosity burned brighter than her fear. We have to. This is what the book was leading us to. Sophie hesitated, then nodded. If we came this far, we can't stop now. Reluctantly, the group descended the stairs, their flashlights casting long shadows on the stone walls. The air grew colder with each step, and the sound of their breathing echoed eerily. At the bottom, they found themselves in a circular chamber. The walls were lined with ancient carvings depicting scenes of people entering the forest and never leaving. At the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it rested a glowing orb. "What is that?" Noah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think it's what we're supposed to find," Emma said, stepping toward the orb. The moment her fingers touched it, the chamber shook violently. The carvings on the walls lit up, and the orb pulsed with energy. "You've got to be kidding me," Liam shouted. "What now?" Emma's vision blurred, and she felt a rush of images flood her mind. Scenes of the forest, the cabin, and the group's journey. But there was something else. A figure, cloaked in shadows, watching them. She pulled her hand away, gasping, "We need to leave, now." The chamber trembled as Emma stumbled back from the glowing orb. The images burned into her mind left her shaken, but one thing was clear. The figure she had seen in her vision was real, and it was watching them. "Emma, what's wrong?" Sophie asked, her voice tight with panic. "There's something else down here," Emma whispered. "We need to get out. Now!" Noah glanced at the carvings on the walls, which now seemed to move, their figures shifting in the dim light. "I don't think this place wants us here." The group turned toward the staircase, but as they began to climb, the sound of footsteps echoed from above. They froze, their flashlights aimed at the stairs, but the beam only illuminated the empty stone. "Who's there?" Liam called out, his voice trembling. A low, guttural laugh echoed in response, chilling them to the bone. Without waiting for answers, the group bolted up the stairs. Their footsteps echoed in the narrow passage, mixing with the eerie laughter that seemed to grow louder the closer they got to the surface. When they finally burst into the clearing, the light from the stone slab was gone and the forest was bathed in an unnatural silence. The group didn't stop running until they were far from the clearing. The forest, once familiar, now felt like a labyrinth, its trees twisting unnaturally, obscuring their path. "Where are we?" Sophie cried, clutching Emma's arm. "This isn't the way we came." Emma glanced at the book in her hands, flipping through its pages in desperation. The symbols were glowing faintly now, as if guiding her. "This way," she said, pointing toward a faint trail that seemed to materialize between the trees. "You're trusting that thing?" Liam asked, incredulous. "Do you have a better idea?" Emma shot back, already moving. The group followed her, their flashlights flickering as if the batteries were dying. The laughter from the chamber still echoed faintly behind them, accompanied by the occasional snap of a branch or rustle of leaves. "We're being followed," Noah whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "Don't look back," Emma said firmly. "Just keep moving." As they pushed forward, the forest began to change. The air grew warmer, the trees thinner, and the ground softer underfoot. It was as if they had crossed into another part of the woods entirely. Ahead, they saw a faint glow, different from the orb's light, but equally unnatural. The group hesitated, unsure if they should approach, but Emma felt an inexplicable pull toward it. "It's a trap," Liam said, holding her back. "Whatever this is, it's not safe." "We don't have a choice," Emma replied. "The forest is leading us somewhere." Reluctantly, the group moved toward the glow, emerging into another clearing. At its center was a massive tree, its roots sprawling like veins across the ground. The glow emanated from the base of the tree, where the roots formed a hollow. "This doesn't feel right," Sophie murmured, backing away. "It's the only way," Emma insisted, stepping closer. The book in her hands grew warm, its pages flipping on their own until it landed on a blank page that began to fill with words. The glowing words read, "The forest chooses who stays and who leaves. Balance must be restored." "What does that mean?" Noah asked, reading over Emma's shoulder. "It means we were brought here for a reason," Emma said, her voice barely audible. Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath the tree shifted, and a figure emerged from the hollow. It was the shadowy figure from Emma's vision, its form tall and indistinct as if made of smoke, its glowing eyes locked onto the group. "You've taken what is not yours," the figure said, its voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the air. Emma clutched the book tightly. "We didn't mean to, we just want to leave." The figure stepped closer, and the forest seemed to close in around them. "The balance was broken long before you came," it said. "But now you must decide. Will you restore it?" "What does that mean?" Liam demanded, his voice cracking. The figure gestured to the book in Emma's hands. "The answers are within, but the choice is yours." Emma opened the book again, the pages filling with images and symbols she hadn't seen before. They depicted two paths. One showed the group leaving the forest, the trees parting to reveal sunlight and freedom. The other showed the forest consuming them, their forms fading into the trees. "It's asking us to choose," Emma said, her voice shaking. "What kind of choice is that?" Sophie cried. "Of course we want to leave." Emma hesitated, her eyes lingering on the second image. The forest had been alive with warnings and signs, as if it were trying to communicate something. I think we need to give something back." "Like what?" Noah asked. "We didn't take anything." Emma's gaze fell to the orb she had taken from the chamber. Its glow was faint now, but she could feel its weight, not just in her hands, but in her mind. I think it belongs here." "No way," Liam said. "What if that's the only thing keeping us alive?" "It's the only way to restore balance," Emma insisted. She stepped toward the tree, ignoring the protests of her friends. The shadowy figure watched silently as she placed the orb at the base of the tree. The ground rumbled and the glow intensified, spreading through the roots and into the forest. The figure nodded once before dissolving into the air. The oppressive weight of the forest lifted instantly. The trees seemed to shift back to their natural state, and a path opened before them, leading toward the trailhead. "Is it over?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling. "I think so," Emma said, though she wasn't entirely sure. The group followed the path, their flashlights steady now, the laughter and growls from before replaced by the peaceful sounds of the forest. When they finally reached the edge of the woods, the morning sun greeted them warmly. "We made it," Noah said, his voice filled with relief. As they looked back at the forest, Emma clutched the book tightly. The balance had been restored, but she knew the forest's secrets would stay with them forever. The drive back to town was quiet, the group still processing everything they had experienced. The once familiar road seemed surreal after the eerie world of Blackwood Forest. Noah fiddled with his camera, scrolling through photos of their adventure. Many were beautiful, capturing the forest majesty, but as he scrolled further, his brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" Sophie asked from the passenger seat. Noah hesitated, holding up the screen. "Some of these weren't there before." The others leaned in to look. Among the photos of trees and trails were strange images, shadowy figures in the background, glowing symbols carved into rocks, and most disturbingly, a blurry image of the cabin. None of them remembered taking those shots. "That's not possible," Liam muttered, rubbing his temples. "We're out of the forest. It's over." "Maybe the forest isn't done with us," Emma said quietly, clutching the book in her lap. Once they were back home, the group made a pact never to speak of the events in Blackwood Forest to anyone. They couldn't explain what had happened, and even if they tried, who would believe them? But Emma couldn't let it go. The book was still in her possession, and every time she opened it, more pages seemed to fill with strange symbols and cryptic messages. Late one night, she found herself drawn to a particular page. The symbols seemed to pulse under her gaze, forming words. "The forest's secrets are not yours to keep." She slammed the book shut, her heart racing, but the pull of the book was undeniable, and she knew she couldn't just ignore it. Weeks passed, and the group tried to move on with their lives, but each of them felt the forest's presence lingering. Sophie began dreaming of the shadowy figure, its glowing eyes watching her from the trees. Liam noticed strange carvings on the trees in his backyard, symbols that resembled the ones from the book. Noah's photos began to change. Images he had taken in town now showed faint glimpses of the forest in the background. Emma, meanwhile, couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was calling her back. The book's pages continued to fill with new symbols, diagrams, and warnings. One night, she found a new message. The balance remains fragile. Choose wisely. She knew then that their journey wasn't truly over. Reluctantly, Emma called the group together. They met at her house, each of them visibly uneasy. "I think we need to go back," Emma said, placing the book on the table. "Are you serious?" Liam snapped. "We barely made it out alive last time." "It's not over," Emma insisted. "The forest is still reaching out. It's showing us things for a reason." Sophie shivered. "I've been having dreams. The forest, the figure. It feels like it's waiting for us." Noah nodded reluctantly. "I've seen it too in my photos. I think Emma's right. We have to go back." Liam groaned, running a hand through his hair. "This is insane. But if you're all going, I'm not letting you do it alone." The group returned to Blackwood Forest, this time armed with more caution and determination. The path seemed clearer, almost welcoming, as if the forest knew they were coming. Emma held the book tightly, using its cryptic messages to guide them. At the clearing where the tree and glowing roots had once stood, they found something new, a small pool of water, perfectly still, and reflecting the sky like a mirror. The book's pages flipped on their own, landing on a new message. The truth lies beneath. "I guess we go in," Emma said, her voice shaking. Without hesitation, she stepped into the water. The others followed, and as the surface rippled around them, they were pulled into another world. They found themselves in a place that defied explanation. The sky was a kaleidoscope of colors, and the trees shimmered with an otherworldly light. At the center of this strange realm stood the shadowy figure, now clearer than before. It was no longer menacing, but seemed ancient, wise, and powerful. "You have returned," it said, its voice resonating like a melody. "You seek to understand." Emma stepped forward, holding the book. "Why us? Why bring us here?" "The forest chose you," the figure replied. "You are its stewards now. Its balance is fragile, and its secrets must be protected. Will you accept this burden?" The group exchanged uneasy glances. They had come seeking answers, but this was more than they had bargained for. "What happens if we say no?" Liam asked cautiously. "The forest will find another way," the figure said simply. "But it may not be kind." Emma looked at her friends, then back at the figure. "We'll do it. We'll protect the forest." The figure nodded, its form beginning to dissolve into the air. "The forest thanks you. But remember, its secrets are not yours to keep." When they awoke, they were back in the clearing, the pool of water gone. The forest was peaceful, almost serene. They felt different, as if the forest had left a part of itself within them. As they made their way back to the trailhead, the group felt a strange sense of purpose. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew one thing for certain. They were now part of the forest's story, and it was part of theirs. The forest let them go, for now. Weeks passed after their return from Blackwood Forest, but life didn't return to normal. Each member of the group began to notice changes within themselves. It started subtly. Emma's uncanny ability to read patterns and understand connections she hadn't noticed before, Sophie's heightened sense of intuition, Noah's newfound affinity for capturing fleeting, unexplainable moments in his photography, and Liam's physical endurance and precision, almost like the forest had gifted him the skills of survival. The most striking change, however, was the mark. On the back of their hands, faint but unmistakable, was the same symbol that had guided them through the forest, the intricate circle with lines converging at its center. At first it was barely visible, but as days turned into weeks, it began to glow faintly whenever they were near nature. "What do you think it means?" Sophie asked one evening as the group sat on Emma's porch staring at their marks. "I think it's a reminder," Emma said, that we're connected to the forest now, that it's watching us. Watching or protecting, Noah wondered aloud. Maybe both, Liam muttered. But if this is permanent, we need to figure out what it wants from us. The book, still in Emma's possession, remained a constant source of mystery. Its pages continued to fill with symbols and messages, many of which were warnings or instructions. One night, Emma found a new entry. The balance is threatened. Return. The message was accompanied by an image of a tree in the forest, its roots darkened and twisted as if it were dying. Emma called the group together. We have to go back, Liam groaned. Again? We barely made it out last time. It's not the same, Emma insisted. The forest chose us for a reason. If we don't go, who will? Reluctantly, the group agreed. They packed supplies and set out for Blackwood Forest once more, their marks glowing brighter as they approached. The forest welcomed them back, but it felt different. The air was heavier, the trees darker, and the sounds of the forest were muffled as if something unnatural was spreading. Guided by the book, they navigated to the tree in Emma's vision. When they arrived, they were horrified by what they saw. The massive tree, once majestic, was now blackened and brittle, its roots tangled with vines that oozed a dark, tar-like substance. The ground around it was lifeless, the plants wilted and gray. What happened here? Sophie whispered, her voice trembling. It's like the life has been drained from it, Noah said, snapping a photo. The book's pages glowed, revealing new instructions. Cleanse the roots. Restore the flow. As they began to work, the group discovered that the dark vines were alive, writhing and resisting their efforts to remove them. Liam used his newfound strength to cut through the thickest vines, while Sophie and Noah carefully peeled away the smaller ones. Emma read from the book, reciting strange phrases that seemed to weaken the vine's hold on the tree. The process was exhausting, but as they cleared more of the vines, the tree began to heal. Its bark regained color, and its roots pulsed faintly with light. The ground around them seemed to breathe, the plants slowly reviving. But the darkness wasn't going without a fight. As they worked, shadowy figures began to emerge from the trees, their glowing eyes identical to the figure they had seen before. "We've got company!" Liam shouted, grabbing a branch to defend himself. "Keep going!" Emma yelled, her focus unwavering. "We're almost there!" As the last vine was removed, the tree released a blinding pulse of light. The shadowy figures froze, their forms dissolving into the air. The forest seemed to exhale, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as sunlight broke through the canopy. The group collapsed at the base of the tree, exhausted but victorious. The book's pages filled with one final message. The balance is restored. You are the protectors. What does that mean? Sophie asked, leaning against the now thriving tree. I think it means this isn't the end, Emma said, her voice heavy with realization. The forest will call on us again. Back in town, the group began to notice subtle changes in the world around them. The forest wasn't the only place in need of balance. Pollution, deforestation, and neglect of natural spaces mirrored the corruption they had seen in Blackwood. We can't just wait for the forest to call us back, Noah said one evening as they gathered at Emma's house. We have to act. Inspired by their experiences, the group started small, organizing cleanups, advocating for conservation, and educating others about the importance of preserving natural spaces. Their marks became a symbol of their mission, glowing faintly whenever they were on the right path. Years later, the group's efforts had grown into something much larger. They founded an organization dedicated to protecting natural spaces, blending science and the mysterious knowledge they had gained from the forest. They never forgot their connection to Blackwood Forest, visiting it often to ensure the balance remained intact. Though the forest never spoke to them directly again, they could feel its presence, a quiet reassurance that they were on the right path. And every so often, when the sunlight hit their marks just right, they would glow, a reminder of the forest's gift and their shared purpose. The years following their transformation into guardians were not without challenges. While their conservation efforts gained momentum and inspired many, The group began to notice subtle, unsettling signs that their work was far from done. One autumn morning, Emma awoke to find the book glowing faintly on her desk. She hadn't opened it in months, but now its pages flipped on their own, stopping at a new entry. The balance is shifting again. Prepare. Emma called the group together immediately. They met in the cabin they had converted into a headquarters on the outskirts of Blackwood Forest. "It's happening again, isn't it?" Sophie asked, her voice tinged with fear. Emma nodded, holding up the book. "The forest is warning us. Something's wrong." "What now?" Liam sighed. "Another corrupted tree? More shadowy figures?" "Maybe," Noah said, staring at his mark, which had started glowing faintly. "Or maybe it's something bigger." The book offered no clear answers, only a cryptic map leading to an uncharted part of the forest. Despite their apprehension, the group knew they couldn't ignore the call. The uncharted area of Blackwood Forest, known in local legends as the Deepwood, was said to be impenetrable and untouched by human hands. As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, the trees thicker, and the light dimmer. The forest seemed alive in a way they hadn't experienced before, as if it were watching their every move. Emma consulted the book frequently, its pages now filled with symbols that glowed faintly, guiding their path. They encountered strange phenomena along the way, rocks that pulsed with warmth, streams that ran against gravity, and whispers carried on the wind. "Is it just me, or is this place different?" Noah asked, snapping photos of the surreal landscape. "It's like another world," Sophie agreed. "But why hasn't anyone ever found it before?" "Maybe they weren't supposed to," Liam said grimly. At the heart of the Deepwood, they stumbled upon a circle of ancient stones, each one etched with symbols similar to those in Emma's book. As they approached, the air grew heavy, and shadowy figures began to materialize around them. Unlike the hostile shadows they had faced before, these figures exuded an aura of authority. One of them stepped forward, its form more defined than the others. Its voice echoed like the rustling of leaves in a storm. "You have come," it said. "The balance is in peril once more." Emma stepped forward, clutching the book. "We're here to help. What's happening?" The figure gestured to the circle of stones, which began to glow faintly. Images appeared within the light. Factories spewing smoke, forests being cut down, rivers choked with waste. "The corruption of your world seeps into ours," the figure said. "The balance cannot hold if the destruction continues." "Are you saying it's our fault?" Liam asked, his voice defensive. "No," the figure replied. "But you are the bridge. Only you can restore what has been broken." The Council of Shadows presented the group with a choice. To restore the balance, they would need to undertake a series of trials within the Deepwood, each one testing their connection to the forest and their commitment to its protection. The first trial took them to a withered grove, where the air was thick with decay. The task was simple: revive the dying trees. But the moment they touched the soil, they were overcome with visions of humanity's neglect, images of wildfires, deforestation, and polluted skies. "It's overwhelming," Sophie whispered, tears streaming down her face. "How do we even begin to fix this?" "Together," Emma said firmly. She placed her hands on the ground, and the others followed suit. Their marks glowed brightly, and the grove began to heal, its trees regaining life as the visions faded. The second trial tested their unity. They were separated and placed in a maze filled with illusions, each one preying on their deepest fears. Only by trusting one another and following the faint glow of their marks were they able to reunite and escape. The final trial brought them to the heart of the forest, a colossal tree that towered above the canopy, its roots sprawling like veins across the ground. The tree pulsed faintly, its light dim and flickering. "The heart sustains the forest," the shadowy figure explained. "But its connection to your world is failing. You must choose, sever the connection or strengthen it." "What happens if we sever it?" Noah asked. "The forest will survive, but your world will suffer," the figure said. "If you strengthen it, the balance may hold. but it will require great sacrifice. Emma looked at her friends, their faces pale but determined. We can't abandon the forest, it's part of our world too. They placed their hands on the heart, their marks glowing brighter than ever. The tree's light grew stronger, spreading through its roots and into the forest. But as the connection deepened, the group felt a part of themselves being drawn into the heart, as if the forest was claiming them. When the light faded, the group found themselves back at the circle of stones, their bodies aching and their marks glowing faintly. The shadowy figure stood before them, its form flickering like a dying flame. "You have done well," it said. "The balance is restored, for now." "What does that mean?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling. "The connection is fragile," the figure said, "but as long as you protect it, the forest will endure. You are its guardians now, in every sense." The figures dissolved into the air, leaving the group alone in the deep wood. As they made their way back, the forest seemed lighter, its presence less oppressive. But they knew their journey was far from over. Back in the world beyond the forest, the group's marks became a source of inspiration. They founded a global initiative, blending conservation with education and advocacy. Their work reached far beyond Blackwood Forest, uniting communities in the fight to restore balance to the planet. Though their connection to the forest remained a secret, they often returned to Blackwood, feeling its quiet reassurance and the strength of the bond they had forged. And every so often, when they stood among the trees, they could feel the heart's pulse, a reminder of their purpose and the legacy they were building. Years passed and the group's lives evolved alongside their mission. Emma became the director of their global conservation initiative, working tirelessly to unite communities in restoring natural spaces. Sophie focused on environmental education, inspiring young minds to cherish the planet. Noah used his photography to showcase the beauty of endangered ecosystems, while Liam led hands-on efforts to rehabilitate damaged forests. Though they continued to visit Blackwood Forest, their marks had begun to fade, signaling that their direct connection to the forest's power was diminishing. Yet, they never forgot their bond with the heart. One winter evening, as they gathered to celebrate another successful year, the book glowed for the first time in months. When Emma opened it, a single word appeared: farewell. The message was accompanied by an image of the heart, its light shining brilliantly. The group knew what it meant. The forest no longer needed them. Their role as guardians was coming to an end. The next morning, they returned to Blackwood Forest one last time. The forest felt different, alive and vibrant in a way they hadn't seen before. As they approached the heart, they noticed its roots glowing faintly, the light pulsing in a steady rhythm. The shadowy figure appeared before them, its form now more human-like, as if the forest itself had evolved. "You have fulfilled your purpose," it said. "The balance is strong, and the heart will endure. Your connection to the forest has been a gift, but it is time to release you." Emma stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Will we ever be called back?" The figure smiled faintly, a gesture that seemed almost human. "The forest will always be with you. Though your marks will fade, the bond remains in your spirit. You have given much, and now you must live freely." One by one, they placed their hands on the heart, feeling its warmth flood through them. The marks on their hands glowed brightly for the final time before fading completely. The group left Blackwood Forest with heavy hearts, but also a profound sense of peace. They had done what they were chosen to do, and now it was up to the world to continue their work. Their initiative expanded, reaching global audiences and sparking movements for reforestation, wildlife preservation, and environmental justice. The stories of their conservation efforts inspired countless others to take action, proving that even ordinary people could make an extraordinary difference. Though their marks had faded, the group often felt the forest's presence in their lives. Emma would sometimes hear the rustling of leaves when no wind was blowing. Sophie dreamed of the heart's light. Noah's photographs seemed to capture glimpses of the shadowy figure in the background, and Liam felt an inexplicable calm whenever he walked among trees. Blackwood Forest remained a sanctuary, thriving under the balance they had restored. The heart pulsed steadily, its light reaching far beyond the woods, touching the lives of those who chose to listen to nature's call. Decades later, Emma sat on the porch of her small cabin overlooking Blackwood Forest. The world had changed. More forests were protected, rivers ran clearer, and communities lived in greater harmony with the earth. The group's work had sparked a global shift, a legacy that outlived them. As the sun set, she felt a familiar warmth in her chest. The forest was saying goodbye, but also thank you. She smiled, closing her eyes and feeling the heart's pulse one last time. The forest was safe, the balance was restored, and the guardians would always be remembered.